Thank you everyone for joining us early on a Saturday morning, being here at the high school. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Mizuko. I'm the town manager here in Norwood. Thank you all for being here for Municipal Finance 101 and Town Meeting 101. There's nothing more exciting on a Saturday morning than talking about the mechanics of town meeting and municipal finance. See, we gotta have some energy in the room when we're talking about really exciting topics. We're gonna go through, three of us are gonna mainly present today. Myself and Jeff O'Neill, our finance director, will take you through Municipal Finance 101. And our moderator, who is right here, Madam Moderator, is going to take us through Town Meeting 101, where she's going to go through the mechanics of town meeting. A couple of just introductory items. We have budget books available. If you would like a hard copy of the budget book, it is available on the website. We have 2 more information sessions, Monday night and Wednesday night. They will also be here in this room. And then Town Meeting is Monday, May 11th. So these sessions will be recorded. They will be available on NCM, and they'll be sent out to everyone as we after they're finished. As we go through the presentation, feel free to stop and ask any questions. Some of the way town meeting works and some of the way we handle municipal finance can be a little obscure, so this is a great chance to ask questions. And even if something makes no sense at all and it sounds really stupid, it probably is. So feel free to stop and just say, that sounds really stupid, can you explain it again? Because Massachusetts municipal finance is just fundamentally different than how the rest of the country does municipal finance. Don't know how or why, but that's just how we've developed here in Massachusetts. Can the folks online hear us? If you could maybe type in the chat just so we know that we're good online, or give a thumbs up. We'll assume that they can hear us. Madam Moderator, do you want to join me up here? I think we're actually going to do Town Meeting 101 first, if that's okay with you.
I got a thumbs up.
All right, we got a thumbs up. The folks online can hear us. Sounds good. Madam Moderator, if you want to come up, I'm going to turn it over to you for the Town Meeting 101 process, and then we will go into basics of municipal finance. Madam Moderator.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mizuko. Morning.
Morning.
Morning. There we go, there we go. I was almost gonna do, you say town, you say meeting, you say town, you say meeting, but we won't do that this morning. I'm Jerry Slater, as Mr. Mizuko said. For today's session, you can call me Jerry, you can call me Slater, Slates, whatever you want to call me, but once we hit town meeting, anyone who addresses me, including the town manager and my husband, Alan Slater, have to call me Madam Moderator, and that's part of a little bit of our tradition and also the proper way to address a moderator. So I was elected 3 years ago. I was the first woman moderator here in Norwood, and traditionally been Mr. Moderator for years and years and years. So you'll still hear people stumble on the Madam Moderator thing. I get called Ms. Chairman, Chairlady, Board Head, whatever, or Mrs. Moderator, which is my personal favorite. But anyway, that's a little bit of the convention there. So what we're going to go over today is, and this is the 7th year, I believe, that we're doing a Town Meeting 101 and a Municipal Finance 101. And it's really good whether you're an existing town meeting member or new to the fold, and congratulations on all the new town meeting members who got elected this time around. We look forward to greeting you. Sometimes it seems like it's a really onerous process. It really isn't once you understand how it works and get used to kind of the flow of town meeting. And I'm glad to see we've got some veterans here who can add to the conversation as well. So we're going to go over a little bit of the introduction to kind of the cadence of town meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about the rules of procedure. We're really, really lucky our rules of procedure are in the town's bylaws. And if you're a new town meeting member, I think you were given a copy of the bylaws. They're also up on the website, so it's very transparent. We'll talk about speaking and debate and registering to speak, which is something that is very unique to Norwood Town Meeting and something that we're really proud that we have. And I will tell you, we are the envy of other towns because of the register to speak process. We'll talk about the warrant and different types of motions and votes and how we vote, which is also a little bit has changed over the last couple of years where we have electronic voting. The town clerk is with us today, Mary Lou Bowen, and she's going to take you through a couple of things that are very important as you check in and get ready for town meeting. And we also have the vice chair from the FinCom, Alan Slater, here, who's going to talk a little bit about just the role of the Finance Commission. I'll handle the role of the selectmen, which is really a prep role more than anything. I didn't change the picture. We are going to be at the Coakley Middle School for town meeting this session, for all of it. That is new. It will probably be a one-time thing, but we thought it was really, really important since town meeting played such an integral role in the approval and the ultimate construction of the new Coakley Middle School that we actually do town meeting there. I will tell you that Superintendent Luff will be conducting tours before the meeting, so if you want to come early, 5:30, Tim Luff, you will actually get a tour of the building with the superintendent, which we're really excited about, and we will be putting that out on the last reminder about town meeting. And then town meeting will start promptly at 6:30. One tip, and Mary Lou will talk about it a little bit as well, is you really want to get there early. Now, Superintendent Luft has promised that he will end the tours in plenty of time for you to go in and check in, and also get your electronic voting device and get settled in your seat. Picking your seat may be the hardest decision you have of the night, especially because we're going to be in a new venue. So folks that traditionally have sat in their section in the high school might be a little bit, might have to take an extra second on that. All right, we are representative town meeting here in Norwood, and that means that you all are elected. There are 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth. 301 of them have town meeting, but only 32 of them have representative town meeting. Representative town meeting is, again, you are representing the entire town, but you're representing your district, one of 9 districts. So again, important, you're elected, you're representing, and because of that, we know how many people we're going to have coming to town meeting, and obviously you have a extra duty, if you will, because it's not just about your own personal issues that you might have, you are representing your voting district. Town meeting, the cadence of town meeting, so coming up on May 11th, the day after Mother's Day, which I always remember because Mother's Day weekend for me is a prep weekend, is the second Monday of May. By our bylaws and by the charter, that's the day that our annual town meeting starts. So it will always be that. It is a Monday. It is by law. So that's the one date that you can always count on. Annual town meeting. Most important thing that we do during annual town meeting is that's the budget. So again, that's the reason for the timing on the town meeting being as it is, in order to allow enough time for that budget to get approved for the coming year. In addition, we will almost always have a special town meeting, at least one special town meeting when we have the annual town meeting. A special town meeting, typically when we have the annual, will actually occur before. Now we have to start the annual because again, that's per our bylaw, at 6:30 on that Monday, the 11th. But what we will be doing because the 4 articles, is it, Mr. Mizuko?
4 on the special.
Yeah, 4 articles on the special town meeting, and again, next week, the info session will go through those particular articles, concern this year's budget. So it's basically allocations from this year's budget, including my personal favorite article, which is unpaid bills, which takes a 9/10 quantum of vote, which is always fun. That needs to occur before we start the annual, so we go through a process where we adjourn the annual temporarily, we start the special, and then we would bring up the annual right after the special is done. Other special town meetings, we always have one in the fall. That one will primarily concern capital items. So that's when we do our capital plan and approve that. There will also always be some forms of other financial articles and other business that the town needs to attend to. One thing that we started a few years ago, and it's on an as-needed basis, is a winter town meeting. So the fall town meeting generally falls in November, October-November timeframe, so you're aware of that. We've started, when we have enough business for it, a winter town meeting. And that is really to concentrate on any zoning articles. Zoning articles are definitely a little bit more comprehensive, take more time traditionally, and more prep for not only the boards that might be presenting them, as well as town meeting members to really learn the ins and outs. So we've separated that out. We haven't done it the last 2 years. I think 3 years ago was the last time that we did it. But we'll see what happens. Again, there could be a winter town meeting. Any questions on the cadence of the meetings? All right, as I mentioned, oops,
I have
there was a
a
question.
hand up.
All right.
Ann Makowitz, District 7. Madam Moderator, what was the rationale for scheduling this on a Saturday?
I'm not really sure there was a rationale for it, Ms. Mankiewicz, except for the fact that because we had a rather extensive, we have 2 additional info sessions having to do with the warrant articles, that we felt that doing this session on a Saturday, we would spread things out a little bit, especially since the following week, we start town meeting and we'll be meeting twice a week. So it was really done for the benefit, and again, this meeting is being recorded, Ms. Mankiewicz, as Mr. Mizuko said, so if anybody couldn't make the meeting or couldn't be online today on Saturday, but we really did it for the convenience of the members. Trust me, it was,
Okay.
we all didn't, we all were like
Excuse me,
jumping
Madam
into a Saturday. Yes, Ms. Mankiewicz?
Excuse me. When I was first elected rep, all of the intro and info meetings were in the same week. It is not a hardship. To me, it is a hardship on Saturday. Despite the fact that this is going to be video, you can't interact with a video and ask questions. So in the future, just my opinion, I would prefer not to have any of these sessions on the weekend.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mankiewicz, appreciate your feedback. Any other questions? All right. So, as I mentioned, we are lucky that here in Norwood, we have our rules of town meeting are right in our bylaws. Right there, actually, looks a little bit newer on the website because we've updated them a little since this version. But you can find all the rules of procedure there, which is definitely something that I would recommend that you take a look at. I'll regularly refer to it. We use kind of a combination of Robert's rules And the Bible in Massachusetts, that the Massachusetts Moderators Association puts out, which is called Town Meeting Time. But it makes it very clear what the limits of debate are, what our rules around about methods of taking votes, and motions. And again, motions tend to be daunting if you're not familiar with them, but for the most part, what you're going to see is a motion being made and then seconded. Most of our motions, and again, per the rules, can be amended, which means that a change, as long as it doesn't materially change the article, can be taken from the floor. But the articles are published in advance, and the motion has to do with the article. Yes, Rachel?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Barros, District 8. I'm curious about something, I'm not sure if I'm jumping the gun here, but in regards to debate, are you moving on to that next, or I have a question about the debate part.
Sure.
And my question is, I was confused, as this is my second year as town meeting member, and I was confused about, when discussing the budget, and we're only allowed to talk about one particular article at a time, but the budget is sort of a whole picture, the whole pie. There were a couple times when making a point in the debate, I referenced a different article to consider the relationship between the budget items in the budget, and that was not allowed. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that part.
I'm actually going to hold that for a second, because I'm going to talk about the difference between articles and motions.
Okay,
And that's where that comes into play.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. All right, again, a couple of quick things that I just wanted to mention on rules that are really, really important, especially for new members, is the use of things like points of information, point of information. So point of information, and you'll see it in there, is basically you can interrupt a speaker for a point of information. You don't have to necessarily get recognized. You literally are raising your hand and saying point of information. Point of information is only if you believe there has been a rules violation. So for instance, let me give you a great example of point of information, because it is very much overused by people who don't necessarily understand what it actually means, is if, for instance, I forget to take a vote on a particular motion, which does happen from time to time as we're moving along, it would be perfectly fine for someone to raise their hand, and they have, and said, Madam Moderator, excuse me, point of information. And I'll recognize the person and say yes, and then say, you forgot to take a vote on that. Absolutely, that is a perfect point of information, and actually a good thing to be doing if I do forget to do that. Or perhaps forgetting to take a second on an article. So again, motions are made and then they are seconded if I forget to actually recognize somebody for a second. So that's a rules violation. Point of privilege, personal privilege, is another one. And point of personal privilege, again, I bring this up because this seems to be, it's one of the most common points of confusion. That is if, for instance, you're having a medical emergency, which hopefully you're not, or if you can't hear because the audio may not be working, or maybe, and we had this recently, where we had an evening where the high school auditorium was especially chilly and members were cold. That's a point of personal privilege, and again, you can raise your hand, Madam Moderator, point of privilege. They don't happen often, but again, both of those points tend to get overused and misused. So just figured I would put that out there right away. All right. Debate, quorum, all our rules are in there. All right, I'm fine.
Okay.
No, that's fine. All right, if you want to be recognized, and again, when you are recognized, so we have a couple of different ways that we are recognized, and I'll get into registered speakers in a second, but you would raise your hand. You need to be recognized. I'll probably ask you to go to a microphone. If we are going to have what's expected to be a lengthy debate, I may be asking people to go stand at a microphone and in order, and I'll recognize them that way. But you would address the body by stating your name and the district that you're representing. If you're not a town meeting member, I would ask that the individual who's recognized give their name and address. At that point, you're able to speak, and if you have a question, you would direct the question through me. So, like Ms. Churchill had a question before and actually did it perfectly, which was, Madam Moderator, through you, I'd like to know this particular number under this budget item. I'd like more of an explanation around it. And then I'll call on, most likely in that case, the Director of Finance, Mr. O'Neill, to explain it, or Mr. Mizuko, or if it's a school item, it might be the superintendent. But the moderator makes the decision around who will address that. Mr. Mizuko tends to want to answer every question, so you will see me not recognizing him. Registering to speak. And again, this is unique to us in Norwood Town Meeting, and it actually is a great process that we actually made part of the bylaw a couple of years ago. And it was recommended by the then Rules Committee that we take this informal process and make it formal. Registering to speak, once the warrant comes out, and if you want to speak on a particular article, the one way to guarantee that you will be able to speak is to register to speak. And you can do this, again, once the warrant comes out, by sending an email to me before town meeting starts, and I take the emails in the order. So in other words, you're registered in the order that you send me the email. You should tell me what article you'd like to speak on, and if you want, it's not required, but I might ask you, what is it, a question, or you want to speak for or against it? But really all you have to do is send an email to me, the moderator at norwoodma.gov, and I will put you in the queue to register to speak. So again, this is the one way, and I'll take that question in a second, this is the one way that you can guarantee that you get to speak, because one of the motions that you're going to hear most commonly is to move the question. And move the question is a non-debatable motion. Someone from the floor who feels that we've debated a particular issue or a particular article enough can raise their hand, and once they're recognized, they can move the question. There'd be a second. I can assure you that there will be multiple people that will be willing to second that. We immediately go to a vote on that. 2/3 majority on that. And what that means is if that passes, we vote on that article right away. No more debate, the debate ceases. So that is something that as members feel that they've heard enough, they might bring that motion. It does take a 2/3 majority. It is not an automatic guarantee that it will pass, but that's a method that members will use to move the meeting along. So registering to speak is very, very important if you want to be guaranteed that you can speak. All right, there's a question.
Yes, Madam Moderator, Ann Makowitz, District 7. People do not have to be elected town meeting members to speak, and I think very few people in the town are aware of that. I was just wondering if something could be put on the website and in the Norwood Record, encouraging people to attend town meeting and that they do have a voice even if they don't have a vote.
All right, Ms. Bankless, thank you for that. I know that I generally go on NCM and do a little bit of a promo for town meeting and state it, but we'll definitely take that into consideration. And once again, it is up on the website in the bylaws that anyone can speak at town meeting, but only members can vote. But thank you for that. Any other questions?
Follow-on question,
Sure.
not everybody wants to go online. And there is a certain group of the population in town that is not computer literate. This is why I suggest that something be put in the paper. And being on the Rules Committee, for a 90 person or somebody who's not quite as tuned in to governmental stuff, trying to dig through the bylaws to find that may prove to be problematical.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mankiewicz. All right, so, Ms. Churchill, I'm gonna get to your question here in a sec. The warrant. So the warrant is out. We have 2 warrants this time around, and the warrant is basically the publishing of the business that is going to take place at town meeting. Think of it as the call to action. The warrant has all the articles in it. So the 2 warrants that we have out now is we have the annual town meeting warrant, which if you're a town meeting member, you received in your packet of information. It's also in the budget book. And the special town meeting warrant. The warrant, as I said, has the articles in it, understanding that there are 2 parts to what we do at town meeting. There's the article, which is a very full explanation of the business that we're going to take up. The motion, which is what you vote on at town meeting and is made at town meeting, is not going to necessarily be as extensive as the article, but it does follow the article. So let me give you an example of that. Especially with some of our things like compensating balances, to be able to open accounts for compensating balances. You're going to see in the article Mass General Law. You're going to see, the ins and outs of this. But the vote may just be to allow the treasurer to enter compensating balances agreements. So the motion is going to be a little less than the article, but it pertains to the article. And sometimes it may say as printed in the article as well. But the difference between an article and a motion is just that. The other thing is you could have an article, and Ms. Churchill brought it up. So Article 6, this time around on the annual, is the budget. It's one article, but it's going to be a whole bunch of motions because we basically go through the different sections of the budget and each motion corresponds to that section. So, although the article is comprehensive and is talking about the full budget, when we are debating, we debate a motion. And we debate that specific motion. So, Ms. Churchill, to your point, trying to keep us on task for the particular motion that we're talking about and not potentially the article as a whole is why I might say keep to the scope of that motion. Same thing with, you'll see it in the annual, the Community Preservation Act. Community Preservation Act, the projects, the overall approval of funding the projects is one article, but it's divided into separate motions for each individual project, so we can debate the individual projects, where you can either vote in favor, you can vote not to approve it, or you could also vote or amend it to reduce that amount. So that's the reason, that's the nuance between a motion and an article. In most cases, there's a one-for-one relationship, but due to the different parts of an article, we may divide it up into separate motions to make it easier to debate. That help?
Yes. Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
I'm just curious, the reason why I'm curious is because when we talk about budgets for like social services, police, fire, schools, right?
Yep.
They all come from the same funding. They're all coming from the town budget, and they're all social services. But when we have the conversations about each of them individually, it feels that it has felt in the past that it was very divisive between each of the social services we offer as a town when we compared the budgets for each. So it didn't make sense that we wouldn't be able to talk about social services to the town as one budget piece. And so I didn't know if that was a rules thing, or is it the way the town does it just to keep it more on point?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's a judgment call, honestly, whether it's keeping it focused or not. If we start drifting off, that's one of the things that, try to control to keep us focused. I think Mr. Rizzuto, although I am going to call on him this time, probably wants to talk a little bit about, and it's a good time to do it now, to talk about how we subdivide the budget.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Since I probably won't get a chance to speak at town meeting the way things are going, it's a catch-22 about how we appropriate money. Massachusetts is funny. We appropriate money to a cause, but we don't approve a revenue budget. We just say we're going to have a revenue budget. If we appropriate $10 million to the police department, by statute that stays with the police department, and we can't move money within that. If we approved $50 million for general government, then at either my level of the selectmen, they can move money within that line. So we historically appropriate it sort of in the bucket that it goes in. The challenge is at town meeting, we take different motions. We could do an omnibus budget motion, which is what some towns do, and that makes it a little bit more flexible. But what town meeting approves, if we don't take these 6 or 7 category votes, if we just said, the town budget's $175 million, approve $175 million, you sort of lose control on making sure that that money stays within those functional areas. Because when we appropriate money, it's sort of two things. Let's say the police department has a $10 million budget. Money from that budget cannot go to any other department. Can't go to the fire department, can't go anywhere else once it's been appropriated. It further can't go between the salaries line and the operating line. So most of our budgets are 80 to 90% salaries. So if the police department has $9 million in salaries and $1 million in operating costs, we can't just move that around. We can't say, hey, we got 3 open positions, let me buy a cruiser with it by moving the money down here. Massachusetts is very restricted, and we try to keep it as close to that strict structure as we can. You go back about 10 years, the budget used to be something like 60 different votes. So we would have like fire department overtime was separate from the rest of the fire department budget, and then you couldn't even move money in between those lines. So it's balancing between making sure the town can operate without having to call town meeting every sort of day versus maintaining some level of control that money doesn't get moved around or overspent or underspent. It's, like I said, 50-50. An omnibus budget motion is really easy, but then you're starting to you lose a little bit of control there.
And then line items questions would be saved for Monday, Wednesday meetings, right?
Yeah, specific ones, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Any other questions on the difference between what's on the warrant, an article, and a motion? All right, now we're getting to the fun part. So, couple of years ago, by actual recommendation from the Rules Committee of 2019, we introduced and town meeting approved the introduction of electronic voting as a form of voting. So we actually hit the 20th century. I'll show you a better picture of this, but this is literally how small the device is, it's the size of a credit card. You have a lanyard because that way you don't lose it, which is really important. You're going to receive, and Mary Lou will talk about the check-in in a second, you're going to receive this when you check in. You keep it with you at all times. If you leave the hall, you need to bring this with you. So if you're going out to the restroom, going for a drink of water, whatever, taking a phone call, you would surrender your device to the town clerk team that'll be sitting outside there waiting for you. You do not leave your device with the person you're sitting next to so they can handle the next vote for you. It is really important that you keep this with you at all times. They are totally secure. We use a radio frequency for this. Mr. Kidd is back there. I know we were doing some testing to make sure it all works in the middle school, but it does work. It works in any location that we take it to. Your device is assigned to you, and you have this as long as you're a town meeting member. They're numbered devices, so you have the security of knowing that you will always have the same device. We'll test them before we start town meetings, so there'll always be a fun question to make sure that your clicker, as we fondly call them, works. And they're pretty simple to operate. One thing I will tell you, based on town meeting member feedback, we continue to refine the process because it's still relatively new. One of the things that we instituted was you're going to have a time limit to vote, and I will give you a 10-second warning on that, so it's very, you know. The last button you click is the button that gets recorded. The other thing is not always going to use the electronic voting devices for votes. There's some things that are relatively simple that if it doesn't take a quantum of vote, meaning 2/3 or 9/10, that we'll just do a voice vote because it's very obvious that the body may be ready. One of those is moving the question. It may be very obvious that everybody is ready to move on. There might be something that's as simple, something that's a little bit more simplistic that we'll just go to just keep the meeting moving. I want to show you a picture of what this looks like. And the way it works is I'll declare the vote open. You'll see up on the screen a big picture of all the color-coded devices, which is kind of cool. And once the voting is open, you have 3 choices on the electronic voting device. There's a yes, there's a no, and there's a third button if you want to abstain. Hopefully nobody abstains. Again, the beauty of representative town meeting is every vote counts for sure, and you're representing your district. But it's a little simple. It's green, red, and yellow, and the words are also written out if somebody is colorblind and can't see the differences in that. I see a lot of our veterans just shaking their head. Simple, right? Yeah, not, and it actually, honestly, it's one of the best things that we've ever done because it makes the meeting move along. Sam?
Mr. Moderator, sometimes I think people try to hit the buttons earlier before you say something, so that's very important because then you have to do it again and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that you wait until you tell them.
That's good, that's really good feedback. Your vote won't be recorded if you start pressing the button beforehand, so please wait for the prompt. And the votes, you'll see the votes light up, and then at the end, I have a monitor and I will announce the tally, which will also appear on screen. The other thing that we do, and clerk will talk about it, is we publish the votes as well. I think there was a question, was there a question on the line also? No?
Question here.
Sorry,
Back in the room.
Oh,
I have a question. I heard you mention the verbal votes are gonna be something that we're doing, and I noticed that was something that was in the rules change. Are the rules change automatically have changed already, or are they something that's voted on?
The rules change will actually have to come back as individual bylaws,
Oh,
because all our rules are in the bylaws. These are just recommendations that the Rules Committee has made, but they have to be voted on by the body, and it will not, the Rules Committee is still meeting, so there'll be bylaw changes brought forward on any rules that we want town meeting to potentially adopt.
thank you.
Good question. And to Ms. Haley's point, wait for the prompt. You'll see OK on the keypad. Sometimes it's hard to see. You can also see it light up on the screen. And you can correct your vote up until the time that I close the voting. So again, the last vote is the vote that counts. All right. That is a great introduction. We could not do, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into town meeting, leading up to town meeting. And there are many, many people that contribute to this, but I've got to tell you, the town clerk's office is one of the biggest contributors. From the time you get voted in and recording that vote as town meeting members, to getting sworn in, to getting all the materials out to you, to making sure that your clickers are in working order, checking you in, and everything else. So Mary Lou's going to kind of take you through the paces of what her office does to make sure that you're familiar with the process of getting to town meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to info session number 1. Congratulations to all the newly elected town meeting members and the ones that got re-elected as well. So I hope that everybody has received their packets. When everybody got re-elected from the election, we sent out packets in the mail. It had a term letter in it for how long you got elected for. It had a copy of the bylaws that told you that they were online as well, which is the zoning bylaws and the town bylaws, which is a website that you can go to, and it's online as well. We also sent a letter that, an email information letter to everybody. So if everybody has returned their email addresses, thank you. If you have not, please try to get them in. We do not have 100% on emails, but we're trying as hard as we can to get there. So just make sure that you notify us about your email. We also have the town charter, which is also online with the bylaws as well. So hopefully everybody already received all those packets. So when you get to town meeting, there's going to be 3 tables set up. We split it up into districts, so we have each of my staff handles 3 districts. So when you see whatever, we have signs there and stuff. And then we have a poll pad, which we check your name in, which is like an iPad. So when you get there, you're going to give your name and your district. They're going to check you in on the poll pad. They're also going to give you a pink attendance card, which we use. Everybody has to sign the pink attendance card. And on the way into the meeting, you present it to the policeman. There'll be a policeman at the door. That's how we keep track of our quorum. So as soon as we know what the quorum is and we get a quorum, we can start the meeting. So it's important that you sign these pink cards. You're also going to get a badge, and you do need a badge when you vote at town meeting. And we also try to ask if everybody that's a town meeting member can sit kind of in the middle sections. And I know this is going to be a new auditorium, but I know there is a back section too. So if everybody can kind of sit in the front of the back section if you want to sit in the back section, or else just kind of sit, in the middle section as close as you can, because you do need a badge to vote. You can't vote without a badge. The other thing is, let's see, town meeting badge. The other thing is you will be given the electronic voting device by my staff. They're all numbered. So the number that you have is the number that you'll have for this whole year. It doesn't change until after there's a new election and stuff. And like Madam Moderator mentioned, if you do go out of the auditorium, make sure you give it to one of my staff. They're always there. Let them hold on to it and they'll give it back to you when you return. The other thing is, after town meeting, when it ends, my staff will be there with big boxes and stuff, so just return your clicker after each meeting. You can't take it with you and bring it back the next meeting and stuff. We're responsible sending out most of all the town meeting information, and we have done one packet already. Hopefully everybody got it. The annual town meeting warrant is in the budget book, plus it's online. So that's why you did not get one of the annual town meeting warrants in the mail. But you got a special, you got the 2 yellow sheets, you got the rules committee letter, and I also included more email address forms if anybody needed it, or anything like that. Other than that, I think that's about it, right? I don't think there's anything else. If anybody has any questions, let me know. As far as getting sworn in, if you can't get to the town clerk's office to get sworn in before the meeting, I do a swearing in session the first night of town meeting. So if you can't get there, don't worry about it. You will get sworn in, okay? Okay.
Hi, my name is Matthew Heisman. I'm from District 3. And hi, Mary Lou.
Hi, Matthew.
I'm new to you guys. I wanted to ask, where do I come to you to get the badge?
No.
When does that?
When you will get a badge the night that you sign in for town meeting. That's one of the things they'll give to you. They'll send you give you an attendance card to sign and the badge as well. And also at the end of the meeting, if you return your badges, that's great too. Because we collect everything at the end of the meeting and then we just bring it the next meeting. So you get everything the night that you sign in, as far as badges and your attendance card.
Awesome, thank you.
Ellie?
Hi, Arlene Fry, District 1. What time does check-in start for the annual meeting?
Get there as early as you want. We're always there by 5 o'clock. Okay, so get there at 5:30. I'm not sure of, the setup. I know what the setup's gonna be, and it is gonna be a little bit different, but it's gonna be almost the same as what it is here at the Coakley Middle School. So even because it's a new place, I would recommend getting there earlier than later. Also, everybody's gonna enter through door 1. I checked that out the other day. It's gonna be door number 1 at the Coakley Middle School. So it's like a circular driveway. So it's gonna be door number 1 where everybody enters. But yeah, we're always there by 5, so as early as you get there. The earlier the better, because sometimes people wait till the last minute, then you got a line you gotta wait in. And once we get the quorum, even if you're still in line, Madam Moderator will start just giving out information beforehand, not voting on or anything like that, but any information beforehand that she has to give out and stuff. So we try to get started as close to 6:30 as we can. All right, any other questions? And welcome aboard, everybody. You're gonna love it.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And yeah, I'm gonna reemphasize the fact that get there early, kind of fun now. You can take a tour with Superintendent Love, and you'll still have plenty of time to check in. The other thing is seating. We actually rope off the areas where non-town meeting members can sit. Per the rules, town meeting members are supposed to sit towards the front, where A, I can see you, so I can recognize you, and B, to make sure that your voting device is registering with the radio frequency. The biggest thing, we don't know what the sight lines are gonna be in the middle school, but I can tell you if they're anything like the high school, if you're in the back, I'm just not gonna see you and I'm not gonna be able to recognize you to speak. All right, there are a couple things that the Board of Selectmen does. One of which is they actually approve the warrant. So the warrants, as you see them, are voted on by the selectmen. They choose the time and the place for town meeting. Aside from the fact that the date for annual town meeting is by law. They will choose the start time. They will choose the facility where we're gonna have town meeting. They make sure that the logistical, along with, and obviously the general manager's office is very much involved in that as well. There will also be some motions that will be made by the Board of Selectmen. Not to take away from Mr. Slater's thunder, but the Finance Commission, and again, this is by our rules and by law, any financial article will be made, the motion will be made by the Finance Commission. So you'll see that, you pretty much know if there's a dollar amount, it will be coming from the FinCom. If it is bylaw related, if it is a procedure, something that the town needs to do, forming a committee or something of that nature, that's gonna come from the Board of Selectmen. If it is a zoning bylaw article, it will come from the planning board. And that, again, is something that's a little different. And then we have a little bit of something for everyone at this upcoming town meeting. We also have a number of 9 citizens petition articles. So those articles will be made, the motion will be made by the citizen who has brought forth that petition and is the sponsor of the article. Any questions on the role of the selectmen? All right. So again, annual town meeting, it is, I love to fondly call it, it is the FinCom show, because pretty much every motion, not every single, but most motions will be made by the FinCom. They will be voting on them beforehand, and they will be presenting them. So we have Alan Slater, who is the vice chair of the FinCom here, to walk you through a little bit of what happens around those money articles.
This already,
It's already up, yeah.
Yeah. You can do it for me
Cool.
too.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The quote that you see on the left comes directly out of our town charter, dating all the way back to 1914, and it outlines what the central role of the Finance Commission is at town meeting. As Madam Moderator noted, we do play the central role at town meeting. So, what do we do at town meeting? First thing you see right before the first financial article is a report from the chairman of the Finance Commission. Basically, he will give a presentation of the financial health of the community, talk about things like trends, and essentially will summarize much of what is in your budget book, but give the spin on why we think certain things should be done in a certain way. So, in terms of what the FinCom will do, we'll take a look at the articles and the motions and make sure that everything from a financial point of view is reasonable. I mean, as an example, if we look at the budget book and Mr. Mizuko proposes to double his salary, we would certainly take note of that and have some long discussions with the general manager and the Board of Selectmen. But be that as it may, we'll make recommendations to town meeting on what the position should be on the motions. Again, these are recommendations. You are not compelled to take those recommendations. You can disagree with the FinCom, or you could amend the motion accordingly, depending upon what you think it should be. And again, I'll get into a little bit more detail on exactly how the FinCom makes its recommendations. And lastly, as Madam Moderator noted in stealing some of my thunder, the FinCom does take the central role at town meeting, particularly in financial articles, and that's why we basically will be at the front table at the center. So, what you will get an annual budget book. You've already, most of you already have that. That provides quite a bit of information to us. That is on the town's website. First thing in the budget book is a management overview. You see a letter both from the general manager as well as the chairman of the board of the finance commission. Financial dashboards and trends. That's quite a bit of information which you're going to see. It's usually 5 years of information. Things such as revenues, expenses, free cash, where our tax rate is in relationship to other communities, and then quite a bit of financial information that I strongly suggest that people take a look at prior to town meeting, because it'll give you an explanation of why we're doing things the way that we do, and also shows the trends in those different things. How as an example, health insurance has changed over the years, as an example, which is one of the major drivers in our budget. And again, all the supporting schedules, as well as lastly and most importantly, it gives you the annual budget. This is a sample page from one of the budget books. What the FinCom will do, will make a motion, and essentially we're voting on three things. First thing we're voting on, the major thing we're voting on, is this number down here. We will make a motion and we'll explain the funding source for $355,463 for the airport. And what does that really mean? What are we really voting on? We're really voting on three things. We're voting on the bottom line here, which is $355,463, but we're also voting on certain subcategories. You have the salaries total, so we're voting that of this $355,000 some change, $224,463 can be voted for salary. We're voting $131,000 can be voted for operating expenses. So the total of the airport is $355,000, but you can interchange between between some of these subcategories in both salaries and operating expenses. I mean, I'll give you an example. For airport security, and these are estimates that we make at the beginning of the year, that you're going to spend $8,000 for office supplies. We're recommending that you spend $6,000. If you get into the fiscal year when you figure, wait a minute, I actually need $8,000 for office supplies and $6,000 for operating expenses, you can do that. But you can't take money from operating expenses and put it into your salaries total. That has to come out of a subsequent vote of town meeting down the road. Question?
Sorry, lots of questions. Better here the next town meeting though. So specifically regarding the airport, when we talk about maintenance, if we're voting for something regarding maintenance, that is not to include any new projects,
Correct.
right? So helicopter landing pads would not be included in something like maintenance.
Correct. That would be a capital expense and we would vote separately.
Okay. And is there a way to find out a more detailed, if we wanted to look into like a deeper, what this means? Is there like a space where we could see what those costs were? Like what does it mean to maintain buildings? What does it mean to maintain grounds?
There generally isn't anything more detailed in our budget book. If you have a specific question, as an example, on what goes into the item for building maintenance, the airport manager will be there, and you can address a question directly to the airport manager. It has much more, detail as to, you know, what goes into making up that particular number.
Thank you.
Question on line item.
Mm-hmm. Question?
Ann Makowitz, District 7. Does the FinCom also provide us with profit and loss statements for every single department in town, including the airport, et cetera?
We do not. It is not part of the annual budget process. It does not go into the budget book.
I would suggest that we need to have a separate accounting so that the town can see how our operating expenses are going, where the pluses are, where the minuses are.
Okay, thank you. We will take that under advisement. Thank you.
Can I mention something about the line items?
Yeah.
No, I go with the microphone, just.
Okay.
Just to the question about maintenance of grounds and what goes into an item like that, one of the things that's important to remember, we have a number of levels of review of how we expend money. The first is the local level. The accounting department reviews every dollar that gets expensed and every account that gets charged. So if I wanted to buy a Ferrari, for instance, certainly accounting yells at me when I miss a $4 receipt for something, so they would pick up on that. But then you try to charge something like that to a maintenance of grounds, and accounting is that first level that picks up that says, wait a minute here, this is not a maintenance of grounds account. You got to figure out to buy the Ferrari somewhere else. And the accounting team in Norwood, like every accountant in Massachusetts, they actually have statutory authority to deny a request that they consider to be fraudulent or inappropriate. So maybe it was a legitimate vehicle purchase, but we tried to charge it to maintenance of grounds. Accounting has the authority to say, no, this is not a line to buy vehicles. You're not allowed to do that. And I can't overstep them. I can't say, no, just go ahead and put the charge through. So that's that first sort of level of making sure when we have a budget category and what gets charged to it is legitimate beyond the department head, the department admin. Accounting reviews all of those lines to make sure that no, you can't buy a vehicle out of a grounds maintenance line. We also have two other levels. One is our auditor. So when our auditors are doing their tests throughout the year, what they're really doing is they're trying to look at, hey, the town said we spent $100 million in these areas. Did we actually do that? And they will get to a granular level, and they'll do testing on different departments and different lines and say, okay, so you're saying this is airport maintenance of grounds. What's going in this line? And they'll review all of the invoices that have come in for that line and say, no, they'll call it out. If it's a problem, they'll say, hey, you bought a Ferrari that somehow got past accounting. You can't do that. And then we would have an audit finding, which is significant. We rarely, if ever, have findings, but they have that level. The Department of Revenue also reviews any expenditure categories that are over where they're appropriated. So even when we have a situation where we say, okay, we are going to spend a little bit more money in engineering and less in stenographer services, if we're outside of that total, the Department of Revenue will look at that and make sure that we're consistent with our appropriation. Now, emergencies happen, and later we'll talk about how we cover emergencies or unintended expenses, but DOR would also pick up and say, whoa, 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 you were over because you bought a vehicle that you did not have an appropriation from, and then it triggers a whole lot of problems and issues. So there's just a number of layers in there making sure that when we say it's maintenance of grounds or we say it's snow and ice, it's not, new carpet for this auditorium charged to a snow and ice line.
Okay, thank you. One thing I also will say to Ms. Mankiewicz and her question, there have been times over the years, and usually it is once a year, that the FinCom will discuss things like the airport, whether we have the airport in or we get information from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. O'Neill, to talk about the expenses at the airport as well as the revenues to see whether it is a profit or a loss. So even though it's not part of the annual budget book, it is something that the FinCom will look at.
Follow-up. Basically, this is the one time town representatives are all in one place. And again, I would reiterate that I think it would be extremely helpful for us to see where the profits and losses are in the town. Since this is an annual requesting of funds, it should also be a time for accountability as well.
Okay, well, again, thank you. Next slide, please. So, I just explained that when we vote on a typical budget in general government, you vote on, individually you vote on the bottom line as well as you vote on certain categories such as the salary expense, the operational expense, and some budgets will also have an expense for capital types of items. The school budget is completely different based on the Education Reform Act of 1993. Even though when you look at the school budget, and you're probably going to see upwards of 40 pages of really detailed information, you know, how much money you're going to be spending at a particular school, as an example, the number of teachers, supplies, how many number 2 pencils you buy, extremely detailed, but you're only voting on the total bottom line. The school committee and the school department has absolute authority to make changes within their budget to put money from one bucket to another bucket without having to go back to town meeting or the finance commission to get permission to do so. So, any questions on that? Next slide, please. Question.
Yes, Ian Markowitz, District 7. Again, I'm going to reiterate what I requested last year of the school budget. I want to see line items under supplies, because I've done too much extensive substitute teaching over the last 10 years, and there's a lot of waste in that area.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at a special town meeting, the town will distribute what's referred to as this pink sheet. We call it the pink sheet because it comes in pink paper as opposed to what the Board of Selectmen produce, which is referred to as a yellow sheet. So the pink sheet should come out approximately a week before town meeting. It's going to summarize our recommendations. It'll summarize where we think from the different buckets of money we have, where that particular appropriation should come from. And, you know, as appropriate, if we feel it's necessary, we will have comments or footnotes on the particular funding article, funding motions, and the decisions that we make. Next slide, please. This is a typical pink sheet from the past. This was actually at a special town meeting in the fall. And as you can see, you know, on the left, you know, it talks about a particular article. Get my old Radio Shack laser pointer out again. You know, there's a question that was asked before on the airport. This is a specific capital item for the airport. And it shows that for this item, which is on the airport runway, it's being funded for, have to read the number, I think it says
500.
5 something, okay. It says that that's being funded out of free cash. Next item, also funded out of free cash. Go down a little bit, road repair, $2 million. That's paid out of a particular bucket of money, which no longer exists anymore. That bucket of money was expended. And then it goes to certain items that are paid for out of debt service. And there are certain ways, certain buckets of debt service that we have. Here's one for traffic signals. It's being paid out of borrowing. That'd be $5 million. For a item such as traffic signals, that's paid for out of debt service in the general budget. That's paid for out of tax revenues. For something like water utility, whether it's buying a truck, whether it's a street sweeper, or whether it's actually, well, let me back up for a minute. Going to water improvement, going to design of water tanks, those are also paid for out of borrowing. That particular borrowing is not paid out of general government revenues or your tax revenues, that's paid out of your water and sewer rates. So when you see your water and sewer rates, that represents the debt service associated with water and sewer related projects. Okay, so there's a difference. the street sweeper and the water utility truck, those are paid out of retained earnings in the water and sewer department. So, next slide, please. Again, before I do it, any questions on that? The different buckets of money that we use?
That's a good question.
Okay, any general questions?
Yeah, hi, Jim Kirk at District 8. Just out of curiosity, addressing what Ms. Mankiewicz was saying, how would you get a request for a P&L for each department? Would you have to write an article and then submit it, and then it would get voted on in the next year's town meeting? Or, I mean, how would you get a P&L listed?
You want me to maybe answer that?
You want to answer that? Sure.
Yeah, thanks. The idea of a P&L for each department doesn't really make sense. Most departments don't generate any profit. They don't generate revenue. Remember, we're the government. We provide services and we take taxes in. So the airport's a micro example of it. Does do about $500,000 in revenue and $500,000 in expenses a year. But the P&L model wouldn't make sense for the overwhelming majority of our expenses. The school department loses $50 million a year. Well, it's a school department. It doesn't generate revenue. The police department loses a ton of money. The fire department loses. Actually, the fire department makes a couple $1 million in ambulance revenue. So we have our revenues broken out, but the idea of a P&L by department, I just don't know that would actually show anything that would be worthwhile or actionable. The manager's office generates no revenue. The clerk's office generates some fees, but these are just required services. Your senior center, your rec, they generate some revenue, but they're never designed to generate enough revenue to cover their costs. The enterprise funds do, they have to cover their costs, but it just really wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison. The building department makes a huge profit because they bring in millions of dollars of permits, but that's because the law allows us to do it. The airport's an interesting example too, because you could look at airport expenses and airport revenues, but the airport's gonna operate one way or another. We try to raise as much revenue off the services as we can, but the airport brings in millions of dollars of federal grants. So is that part of a profit or loss? We do analyze the airport every 2 years, but I just don't know that model would really apply to on a department by department basis. Sure.
A follow-up. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Mankiewicz, I think she's just wants some kind of a line item of where the money's going, where a profit and loss, it could be a loss statement.
So
Is there a way to find out where a line, where each expense is going?
Sure, we'll get to that in a moment when we talk about how municipal finance is structured. All revenue to the town is considered general fund revenue unless there's a specific law that directs it somewhere else. So the clerk's office, if they make $50,000 a year in revenue, that's a general fund revenue. What the DPW earns, general fund revenue. Police revenue, general fund revenue. There are certain laws that segregate money. It's either into a reserve fund or into an enterprise fund, and we'll talk about those in municipal finance. So there's no, the building department makes $2 million a year in permits. They don't get that money. That's just a revenue to the general fund. All revenues are by law. Yeah, I'll give it back to Alan.
Thank you. Again, if you go to the budget book, if you look at one of the tables, it's referred to as local receipts. That will tell you how much money is generated by the different departments. And as Mr. Mizuko noted, most of that, if not all of that, goes to general revenue. I mean, you're going to look at things like auto excise tax. You're going to look at excise tax on meals, on hotel, how much money the building department generates. In terms of the airport, as an example, there's a line item there for surcharge on jet fuel. It won't answer the whole question, but at least it'll give you some indication of locally, like permits or fees or whatever, how we do generate much of our revenue. Yep.
Follow-on question.
We'll get, Ms. Mankiewicz, we'll get to you in a second. Let me, you be the next one up.
Sorry, just
Ann Makowitz, District 7. Sort of a clarification, follow-on.
Okay.
I'm kind of looking for something simple. For example, these are the total costs for running the airport, salaries, blah, 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 blah. This is what we get in revenue from them, and an addition and subtraction to show the final total.
Understood. Understood, thank you. No, I think she's
She's done.
done. Go ahead.
I was more curious about something, for example, there was a conversation recently about cameras being put up throughout Norwood, street cameras, and how they're being monitored and what they're observing. But the idea of putting cameras up in Norwood was never discussed at town meeting. So when I was asking for receipts or sort of line items, what I was looking for more like was, where would something like that have been discussed, or where would something of that like fallen under a line item? In terms of, once cameras are in place, is there now a maintenance fee for them? So I was looking more for like a specific thing, but I think I could probably just go and talk to the police department too, and ask them about those cameras specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably ask a specific question. Most likely that would be under the DPW, either the DPW or the police department,
Right.
most likely. If you have a specific question, it would likely be in that budget.
I just didn't know if it was a capital one that waited till the fall, or if it was a budget one for maintenance, like, so just trying to.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain times where smaller capital items are incorporated into the base budget,
Okay,
as an example. Larger items will be handled in the fall in the in the regular capital budget.
okay, thank you.
Dave.
Dave Tuttle, District 6. Alan, I have a question back on your airport example. If I, for whatever reason, felt like you grossly underfunded the airport, and I made a motion to increase that by $100,000 at town meeting,
Okay,
that obviously has an impact on the balancing of the whole budget. So
correct.
is it my responsibility to say, and I want you to take that 100,000 out of someplace else, or how does that work?
Great question. It is your responsibility to determine the funding source from that. If you say, as an example, I'd like to take it out of general tax revenue, that's fine. But if you want to take $100,000 out of general tax revenue, that means there's $100,000 less in general tax revenue for the remainder of the budget. So somehow, if we vote 100,000 for the airport, we're going to have to take somehow 100,000 out of other parts of the budget, whether it comes out of one budget item or you take a little bit out of other budget items. That's generally the way that it will be done.
Okay, and sort of the converse of that, if I said I wanted to cut 100,000 because El Nino's coming and we're not gonna have any snow
Yeah.
this year or whatever.
Yeah.
Can I point to specific lines or categories to say this is where I want that cut to come from, salaries or operating expenses?
You would. You do. Same thing if you want to add $100,000 to the budget, you would give the line item to that. You'd say, I want another 100,000. We think it's going to be a really, really, really snowy winter, so I want to put another $100,000 towards snow and ice, as an example.
But ultimately, when it's spent, the department heads could move those lines around.
They could. They would have the, again, only within the bucket of operating expenses.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Again, if you do want to add additional tax revenue, it has to be taken out of somewhere else. I mean, it may be a better option that you add another $100,000 of free cash, as opposed, because we do have free cash available this year. Can't say that for every year. Take that as opposed to using tax revenue.
Right, just one point of that too. So yes, the department heads have the flexibility within the operating expenses. But as Mr. Mizuko said, between accounting, the auditors, and the state, they can't just spend that money. If they have excess, they can't just go and spend that money to their will. There has to be a purpose, and we have to really approve that before they do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the department heads don't have the flexibility to do whatever they want with their bucket of money.
Yep. Any,
Cheryl Nadelli, District 7. Clarification on free cash.
okay,
It historically always seems to be we have tens of millions of dollars in free cash. And historically, it always seems like there's always projects or articles that are always absorbing all of the free cash. Is there a reason why, or why can't we just keep it in the bank?
You can wait till we get through the next presentation for that. More discussion.
Mr. Mizuko has asked that I get through the next presentation, which
Okay.
will go in a little bit more detail. Other than I will say that free cash varies every single year. It's a non-constant amount. We've had some large amounts of free cash the last few years.
Right.
You know, because we've had money from building permits, building permits for the hospital as an example, or FM Global.
Right.
We've had large increases in investment revenue because we had $100 million socked away for the Coakley Middle School. But there have been years where free cash has been in the range of $2 or $3 million a year. So it varies in a given year. And I think the next presentation will go into a little bit more detail on free cash, how it's generated, and how it's spent and it proceeds forward to subsequent years.
Right. Thank you.
Patrick Griffin from District 4. Would you characterize free cash then as something better applied to one-time expenses than to maintenance expenses?
That's really a great question. The short answer is absolutely. It should only be used for certain one-time expenses. We're spending over $7 million of free cash this year to balance the budget. That is not a good idea. Shouldn't be used for that. It's contrary to our financial policies. Having said that, when you have large amounts of money in the bank, it's difficult to go to the taxpayers and say, yeah, we have a budget deficit of $7.5 million. We have $10 million in the bank. Let's forget about that, but let's go for an override. I mean, they'll reject it. I get that. I agree with you completely. I think using free cash to balance the budget is a terrible way to balance the budget. But, reality. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
I just want to, one last thing before we move on to municipal finance, and these are all great questions, so thank you all. One of the things that you saw up there on the motion is indefinite postponement. And I think it behooves me to just take a quick second. You saw that on the pink sheet. That comes up from time to time. That basically means that whoever the sponsor is, whether it be the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, or a citizen, the zoning board, is saying that they don't want the body to take it up at this time. It's essentially withdrawing the article. Unfortunately, you can't withdraw an article once the warrant has been set. So you will see indefinite postponement as a form of a motion as well, and it basically means to not take up the business, or to kind of withdraw that particular article, kill it, if you will. So important that you also know that that's something else that will, in fact, it will occur this town meeting. We're also going to see some motions that are going to be referred to committee, and that might be a case where there's more study that's needed for a particular article or particular issue. Those are also motions that can be made as amendments as well from the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. We are going to jump into basics of municipal finance. I know we've been here a little over an hour and a half, so I'll go through this a little bit quickly. Stop me if you have questions. And it's important to note, any questions you have, you can always email us. We do get questions and call all day long, particularly from town meeting members. So if something comes up, you can always email us. We provide these sessions to get some questions answered in a group format, but by all means, just email us if you have a question and we can get you an answer. Go to the first slide. So the first thing I talk about is the tax rate. And what is the tax rate? What is the tax levy? It all comes down to taxes at the end of the day. Oops, sorry. So Massachusetts functions on a tax levy. Now that levy is the total amount of money that the town is raising from the tax base. So it's a little different than some other states where they do sort of a direct assessment on your property, and where your property goes up, the tax amount of money goes up. In Massachusetts, we have a levy, and that levy is what increases by Proposition 2.5 every year. There we go. The tax base is the total value of all properties that can be taxed in the community. The tax levy is the amount of money that is taken out of that base. So it's a fixed pie. If property values go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that your tax rate or your tax bill goes up, and we'll talk about that. If that pie is just shifting, your values could go up, what you pay could go down, your values go down, what you could pay goes up. I know that sounds a little confusing, but at the end of the day, the bill you pay, if every property in Norwood tomorrow doubled in value, your tax bill would be exactly the same. Your rate would go down, but the bill would be the same. It's half the rate on double the value of the property. What we've seen in the last couple of years that's been a little bit of a challenge with the tax base is residential values have gone up. So the portion of that tax levy that is residential has grown, and commercial has somewhat stayed flat. Some recent new growth from FM Global has been helpful, but commercial properties haven't appreciated as much as residential properties have. Now that tax levy is important because that's the number that Prop 2.5 impacts, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Go to the next slide. The tax rate is what you pay per thousand on your property. Businesses pay, residents pay, but the average tax bill, which is right there in the center, the single family tax bill, that's something we calculate and the state calculates. That's a better idea of understanding where your taxes are and what you're paying. You might have a friend who lives in another town and you say, what's your tax rate? In some ways it's irrelevant. There are towns that have a tax rate a third of ours, and the average home value is millions of dollars, and they're paying 10 times what we are. The average tax bill is what you really want to focus on. You'll notice we're at about $7,100. We're generally lower for nearby communities. Norwood has a healthy commercial tax base. That's what allows us to have a comparatively lower tax rate. I think we're right around the state average. Certainly when you look at, I love looking at Westwood and picking on them, $17,000 is the average tax bill in Westwood. If every resident in Norwood went to paying that amount of money, we would have like district civic centers and district police departments. I mean, we just could not expend that amount of money, but their commercial base is not as large as ours. You pay a tax rate, commercial businesses pay a tax rate that's about double what residents pay. So if your home's worth $1 million, you'll pay that $10.50 per thousand. If you live right next to a business that's worth $1 million, they're paying about $22 or $23 per thousand for property tax. But this is the number we tend to try to look at when we're saying, well, where are our taxes in comparison to other communities? Where are they going to be? The closer you get to Boston, generally the higher the average single family tax bill. The further west you go, generally they tend to be a little bit lower. So there's other information up here, single family values, the average single family value. This price right here is what statistically the average single family home is worth in Norwood. $720,000 is the average price of a home in Norwood. I've been here 9 or 10 years. It was 4.25 when I got here. So we've seen this incredible appreciation of property in Norwood. We've seen it everywhere, but it's been particularly high in Norwood. That can cause an impact on your tax bill, but as I said, that doesn't generate additional money for the town. There's no additional money created by that because that tax levy is a set number. Go to the next slide.
Question?
Yep, go ahead, right here.
Ariel Hire, District 5. If you go back to that
Yep.
slide, so second to last column, average tax bill is a percentage of income. That's more what the normal homeowner will feel in terms of their own personal budgets. What are the levers that the town can use to bring that down for the residents?
So the challenge with that number is it's a statistically accurate number, but it includes a couple of things that has our income level looking lower than other communities. Now, we are not as wealthy as some of our neighboring communities, but we have 5 nursing homes in town, and nursing homes actually have a negative impact on the apparent income of your community. We are lower income than our neighbors, and if you compare us to, I don't know if the average, so you look at the DOR per capita income, we are not as wealthy as our neighbors, but then you look at a Needham or a Westwood, and it's somewhat triple that. There's nothing that we can necessarily do at the local level to increase the wealth level of the community. We would like to. We are an old mill town. We are in many ways comparable to a Fall River, a New Bedford, a Brockton, a Lawrence, or a Lowell. We've just done very well for ourselves as a community over the last 50 years or so. But that number is a little bit skewed by nursing homes in town. I know that a city out in Western Mass was suing their rating agencies because they couldn't get to a AAA rating, and they were a very wealthy town, but they had a couple of large nursing homes, And once you get registered living at the nursing homes, the income level of the community appears to go down. And it's not really accurate to say, well, we have 5 nursing homes, so we're poorer than other communities. But this was Lenox, Mass. They were very frustrated that they couldn't achieve a AAA bond rating because of that. It's a frustration for us with our bond rating because the rating agencies really just care about whether you're rich or not. There are towns out there that are very poorly managed financially, but they're rich, and they have those nice income levels that you see for places like Dover. The rating agency will look at Dover and be like, oh, you're Dover, you're rich, clearly you're AAA, and they can do whatever foolish stuff they want with their money. I know a town in Massachusetts that is very wealthy, known for being very wealthy, AAA rating, a couple of years ago had $0 in stabilization. And the rating agencies just didn't care because this town's wealthy. This town went and built a school without going through the MSBA because they didn't care that it was going to impact the average tax bill by $2,000. They just wanted it now. And like they're wealthy, so they're able to make these really terrible decisions. Meanwhile, we're like, we'll put money in the bank and we're doing this and we're having good budget operating surpluses, and the rating agencies just don't care. That's more me complaining about the rating agencies than anything, but it's a fair point. We are not as wealthy as our neighbors, plain and simple. And towns like Walpole have gone up. I don't know if Walpole's on the list. They've gone up in wealth faster than we have. We have a large immigrant population in town. We have a large working population. We always have. I like to think of us as an industrious community, but we're not a wealthy suburb like our neighbors. We're very different in terms of our demographics and our earning level and our commercial base than our neighbors. But it's a great observation.
This is Ann Makowitz. This is kind of a tongue-in-cheek question. Then why are we always being compared to these other towns when we're asking for more money?
Well, that's a great question. We have to compare ourselves to somebody. And for a lot of our expenses and the services, who are we in competition with? It's the neighboring communities. Who are we comparable to? Norwood's unique. We're, Segal Reese, who's our health director, used to always say that we're sort of too small to be a big town, but we're too big to be a small town. And we do kind of occupy that middle. We are not a wealthy town, but we are not a poor town. And that actually creates a number of problems for us because we are not wealthy like a Needham or a Dover where we can just afford to fund everything we want to do, nor is our sort of poverty level low enough that we have CAP agencies that provide social services and YMCAs. Not that YMCAs are necessarily an indicator of poverty, but we don't really qualify for those services, nor do we have the money to pay for everything that the nice towns do. I mean, if you look at the capital plans of some of these rich towns, we're replacing aging infrastructure in Norwood. They're just, let's build new buildings, and we need a new DPW admin building, millions of dollars, and they're able to just sort of fritter away. So our position being in the middle is pretty challenging in terms of the services that we provide. It's one of the reasons that Norwood tends to provide municipal services. We have a full service rec department. We run our own extended day program where sometimes those are contracted out. We don't get the resources that the lower income communities have. We don't necessarily have the resources that the higher income communities have. Next slide, Mike.
Excuse me?
Yep, go ahead.
We don't always look at the towns that are adjacent to us. And we look at towns that are more like us throughout the state.
I think it depends on what are you looking for.
Right.
You know, for your wages are going to be more comparable to who's around you. Your tax bill, that's somewhat more around you. When you're looking at things like staffing levels, we'll look at it, but we do need to see somebody that's a little bit more our size. Bellingham's probably not a great example of where we should be staffing compared to Bellingham. So Prop 2.5, everyone's favorite law. Prop 2.5 came about in the early 1980s, actually as a way that the state felt they were saving taxpayers' money by restricting municipal spending. So the governor at the time felt that taxes were going up, people were spending too much, and the way to correct that was to stop and control municipal spending. To an extent, it worked. Most cities and towns had a tax rate at the time in the 30s or 40s. So when Prop 2.5 came in, a lot of cities and towns did slash a lot out of their budgets and cut things way, way down. It was originally supposed to be just a cap on the total tax rate for a city or town where it couldn't go above $25 per thousand. And in the last 2 months before it passed the legislature, somebody came up and said, but wait a minute, if a town has a tax rate of $8 or $9 per thousand, they could go to $25 per thousand in a single year and effectively triple your tax bill. And everyone said, well, we can't do that. Let's make sure it doesn't grow by more than 2.5% a year, which was generally what inflation was at the time. So that second piece was put into Prop 2.5. It's been in effect since 1980. It's probably largely worked. Massachusetts generally is below states like New York, New Jersey in terms of taxes for otherwise being a high service state. One of the challenges we have and this is somewhat related to Prop 2.5, and I'll explain the 2.5% increase in a minute. Massachusetts does everything at the local level. Most of the rest of the country has either separate school districts, and they have counties that provide a lot of service. So we might say, wow, the tax bill in Norwood is $7,500. That's a lot of money. My uncle lives in Kentucky, and his tax bill is only $2,000. His municipal tax bill probably is. And he probably gets a county tax bill that's $2,000, and he probably gets a school bill too. So it does equate out. So if you're ever having those conversations with folks, we're at a somewhat disadvantage for how many services we provide at the local level. A colleague of mine recently went to Florida. I'll get the question one second. And took a job as a city manager down there. The county does tax assessing, the county does tax collection, the county provides fire, school districts are completely separate. He basically has a police department and a parks department and a public works department. So it's just, we're structured a little differently. Before I get to that question, Prop 2.5, everyone thinks that means my tax bill can't go up more than 2.5% a year. That's not necessarily the case. That tax levy that we talked about, the total amount of money that is being raised, that cannot increase by more than 2.5% a year without a ballot vote. We add new growth, so additions to the tax base of that. Think of that as a new property getting built, that gets added on top of that. But if that tax levy is $100 million a year, is $100 million next year, it's the maximum it can go up is $102.5 million. Is there a question in the chat?
Just a little piece of history at Acker's District 7. I was a victim of Proposition 2.5 after teaching for 11 years. That bill was put together by a citizen in Framingham, Barbara Anderson, who created Citizens for Something taxation. It was primarily and solely aimed at schools.
Thank you, and the Prop 2.5 was a slash and burn at the time. Some of you knew Bernie Cooper, the former assistant town manager. Bernie was working for the time when Prop 2.5 came about, and he will tell you the stories of they were just cutting everything left and right to get under that $25 level. The state later did things like allowed commercial taxes to be different that provided some relief, but Prop 2.5 is not a bad law. The challenge we face is things like health insurance going up 8, 9, 10% a year when you're capped at your revenues going up 2.5% a year. I wish the state would find something other than property taxes. New Jersey, for instance, has an exemption. They have a similar property tax limitation, but it doesn't apply to pensions and healthcare. Our pension price is not as significant as healthcare, so it's hard to live on 2.5% of revenues when health insurance alone is going up 9% a year. But when they wrote the law 40 years ago, it wasn't as much of a concern, and I'm sure if it wasn't health insurance, there'd be something else. Go ahead, next slide. So we talked a little about what an override is and what that means. All that is allowing the tax levy to go above that 2.5% in a year. It's a ballot vote. We call them overrides. In the rest of the country, they're a lot more common to fund things with a ballot question to say, hey, we want the Parks Department to have an extra couple $100,000. We'll just put it on the ballot. If people want it, they will get it. Capital projects are funded throughout the country more often from a ballot initiative than within the budget, but Massachusetts is just a little bit different in that we have our system of Prop 2.5, and you have to go to the voters if you ever want to exceed Prop 2.5. Next slide. So just talking brief about the budget process, and I know we covered it in some detail. We run on a fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. The budget development process in some ways takes the whole year. I always remind everyone that the budget is really a snapshot in time, and you'll hear that again. That's why we have things like supplementary appropriations. That's why we have things like unpaid bills. That's why we have things like, well, we need money over here. When we prepare a budget, it really is a snapshot in time. If I did the budget 100 times a year, every single time I do it, it would be a little bit different. Now, the only thing I don't like about this slide is it talks about requests. Technically, all the budget requests are a request, but they're really a statement of reality. So the clerk's budget comes through, it's what is needed to get through this next fiscal year, and 9 times out of 10, there's not a whole lot changing to it, and part of that's that we just don't have that flexibility in the budget or with Prop 2.5 to dramatically grow in one area or another. Town department requests come to me, and then ultimately to the selectmen. School requests go to the superintendent, and then the school committee. The overall budget goes to budget balancing. Goes to the selectmen to put on the warrant. The finance commission makes a recommendation on the budget. So there's a lot to be involved in if you want to in the budget process. Obviously, town meeting has the final appropriation say, but there's nothing to stop you trying to get involved in another part of the process. If you really think we want more trees on a particular street and that line should go up, those requests can come in any time of the year. They can come in any time of the budget process. we tend to always see things coming right up at town meeting where everyone says, wow, we really want to do more road paving. You can make that request in August and say, hey, 10 of our neighbors think our road should get paved. Is there any additional money that can be moved into the budget or something along those lines? So even though town meeting is a couple times a year, we're here 365 days a year. So the earlier you're able to advocate for something, the more we're able to build it into that process. So budgets are statements of priorities, although in our context in Massachusetts, they're really statements of realities. And the reason is that we're structurally limited in what we can do in any given year. More than 90% of our costs are personnel costs or fixed costs. And what that means is if you take an office like the accounting department has 4 people in it. So if somebody said, I want to have 2 more DPW employees and just take it out of accounting, well, what you've just done is laid off 2 staff in the accounting office, so there's a job loss there, and you've cut a department in half. So we don't have flexible budgets, we don't have large operating budgets where we can say, hey, you know what, let's just spend $400,000 over here. The reality is the budget every year is incremental because it's based on maintaining the service level from the prior year, and that service level is people. In every department across the board, that's where we spend our money on. Police and fire budgets are comparatively small on their operating expenses. The school department is the same thing. What are you paying for? You're paying for teachers and for specialists. That's where the money goes. The school department doesn't have millions of dollars in discretionary funding. There are some larger counties and cities out there and other parts of the country where they do have discretionary budgets. Here, as we've seen through the line items, the budget's just not very discretionary whatsoever. Those quasi-discretionary items are things that come to town meeting when it's, hey, we'd like to spend $300,000 over here. One question I get sometimes is, well, why isn't something in the budget? The budget that gets presented at town meeting is really the annual operating budget. And if it's not part of that annual operating budget, it should be coming through separately as a separate appropriation. For a couple of reasons. One, the very practical, you don't want your budget department numbers to go up and down, up and down, up and down every year. And then the other is, it's really not what's required to operate the town. We take a fairly, every town in Massachusetts does, conservative approach with, look, the police department needs X number of officers, this is what they need to affect that, this is the budget for it. If we decide that we want to put a new roof on a building, not only is that a capital project, but that's not a need of that department in that year. So you keep your operating budget as tight as you can, focus on what is needed to operate the following year. Next. So we covered a little bit about this when Alan was talking. This is how our budget looks to you. These are our line items. A couple of points that are worth noting. The numbers that are the actual numbers, we always use actual to actual in the general government budget every year. So sometimes you'll see a number and it may look like it went up 20% or 30%. It's because the number we present to you at town meeting is an increase based on what was approved at the last town meeting. That doesn't mean that something may not have changed during the year. So in this case, you have the department head salary up there. We may have hired a new department head at a higher or a lower rate, but that prior year number does not change. If we've had to move money around, that prior year number does not change. So in the accounting department, if they decided that they, the school and the conference line, one was high and one was low, and in the middle of the year they said, okay, well, we're gonna, we need to send this person to this training, and something went up by $1,000 and down by $1,000, we may make an adjustment in the following year, but you're always gonna see the prior year approved number to the number that's being requested. We never change that prior year number. That's not always true in some budgets where they'll make a mid-year adjustment, and then the number is different, so it'll look like there was no increase when there wasn't. We always do town meeting appropriation to town meeting appropriation. Next slide. Question online?
What is longevity pay?
Sure, so throughout some of our contracts, most employees have a longevity bonus or additional payment for X number of years of service. So it might be you hit 10 years and you get $500 a year as a longevity bonus. It varies slightly by contract.
I would suggest, again, that goes to District 7, I would suggest that that be taken a look at. Is it justifiable?
Well, I would think so. I mean, it's part of our collective bargaining agreements. It's common in every town in the Commonwealth as well as with the state itself that it's usually a payment for a certain number of years of service.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there other question online? No. Okay. So let's talk about revenue sources, where we actually get the money to fund the budget from, because it comes from a number of sources. First and foremost is always the tax levy. That's Prop 2.5. That can increase by 2.5% a year. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to, but of course that's the largest revenue stream to the budget. So if you don't have that, you're really not likely to have enough money to fund the budget. What we call new growth. New growth is the additions to the tax base, local receipts, motor vehicle excise tax, meals and room, pilots, ambulance revenues, school-based Medicaid program, building permits, license fees, fines. We talked about this earlier. This is all what we call general fund revenue. By law in Massachusetts, all revenues received are general fund revenues. So we don't allocate them out by department unless there's a specific law that says we can, and that usually requires an appropriation by town meeting to do that for a different type of fund. We get some money from the state, school aid, and what we call UGGA, or unrestricted general government aid. That's supposed to be tax sharing by the state. Of course, we never think it's enough. The state probably always thinks it's too much, but those are other taxes you pay that are given back to cities and towns. And last but not least, free cash, which we'll talk about. Next slide. Any question in the chat?
Yes, hi, Matthew Heisman, District 3. I was going to ask about the sources. Do we lose like federal funding, and do we use that state funding then for like the historic preservation and of the towns? There's really cool history here. So is that used for those purposes?
Sure, I'll answer that in two ways. The school department tends to get some federal funding for certain mandatory programs. We don't get really direct sort of budgetary offsets of federal money. I wish we did. The federal government's got more money than God, but they don't share much of it with us. We have a separate statute called the Community Preservation Act that provides some money for historic preservation. And we'll get into CPA in a moment. I know I'm losing the audience, but we'll get into that. We do get some specific money, shouldn't say we raise taxes in a certain area for historic preservation.
Yeah, I'm very curious about, look forward to learning more. Thank you. This is really cool. You're great.
Thank you, appreciate that. So where does your tax dollar go? We occasionally get this request because other states and towns, people say, oh, my tax bill, it shows me what I'm paying for this or that. I mean, if we were to do it, this is sort of what it would look like. But again, the shared cost of 35%, obviously education is 38%, but that's because school departments are expensive. That's not uncommon to any other community in Massachusetts. We have town-wide more than 1,000 employees. About half of them are a little over half are school employees. So we could do something like this, but it's more just informative of where does your tax bill go. Next slide. So I want to talk for a minute about debt service because we throw the term around here a lot, and usually every year somebody says, oh my God, the town's in debt. Yes, unfortunately we are in debt. Not in the way that you think. Debt service is no different than a mortgage or a car note. It's how the town pays for large projects, particularly buildings and infrastructure. It is common and normal throughout every city and town in Massachusetts and throughout most cities and towns in the country. We do not borrow money to balance the budget. We are not allowed to do that by law. Massachusetts has a strict prohibition on that. So we're not like the federal government that just says, hey, borrow money and pay our bills. We're not allowed to do that. Most government agencies aren't. It's really just the federal government. If we have a shortfall in the budget, we can't go borrow money to plug that shorthole. That's fine. You can put it on the slide. So we borrow money for buildings, large projects. It can either be within or without the levy, and I know these are Massachusetts terms. Within the levy means it just is an item we've added to the budget. So we want to put a new roof on a building. It's $1 million. We got to borrow the money for it. That $50,000 a year or whatever it is goes into the budget as a regular expense. When we do it outside the levy, which is the high school and the middle school, those are big projects that the public have to vote on as a ballot question to allow their taxes to be raised, specifically to pay for that item, and then it goes away when that item is paid off. The utilities also pay their share of debt service. So when we do a water project, that's coming out of your water bill. When the electric company does a project, that comes out of the electric bill. That's just by statute to make sure that the utilities pay for their items. Next slide. Here's our total outstanding debt. We are in debt to $195 million in Norwood. Now it sounds like a lot, but when we actually look at the school construction is obviously the bulk of that. School buildings are expensive. That's the case anywhere in Massachusetts. You can see we have some electric projects, water and sewer projects, and then general includes everything else that we've borrowed money for. You can see that the high school costs us about $1.5 million a year. The middle school currently $6.3 million a year. Those bonds will be paid off in 2035 and 2048. And when they get paid off, that tax levy, that increase in your taxes goes down. Now the reality is it's usually a big hit at the beginning. When it goes off, it tends not to be that much of a decrease in your tax bill because you're talking 20 to 30 years later and relatively it's not as large. I can tell you we have lucked out with what we paid for the high school in 2012. Lexington's building a $650 million high school. Lowell got stuck with a $500 million high school. Thank God we did the high school when we did. Next slide. We talked a little bit about capital planning. I always like to remind people the capital plan doesn't have any money that we don't put into it. So every now and then somebody will say, oh, well that's in capital. We can use that capital money in a couple of years. There's no such thing as capital money. The capital plan is just a plan of how we think we're going to need to spend capital expenditures over the next 5 years, and then we have to fund it every year. Every time I have a new school business administrator come in, they're like, we'll get some money from capital. It doesn't have any money. It's just a list of where we're going to spend the money. Our capital approach is largely, we moved it to the fall. We're really on a 95+% replacement schedule with capital, and what I mean by that is we are very rarely adding to our plant. We're very rarely adding to the buildings that we own and the equipment that we're own. We're just trying to repair and replace the infrastructure and the facilities that we have. We do occasionally have large projects, the high school, the DPW garage, the middle school. Even then, those are actually just replacing existing facilities. So in a perfect world, we would have money to really do the types of enhancements that we would want, but we're really just looking at replacing what's there. 3 years ago, we approved the new water tanks at they're at Highland Cemetery, but they're for the water system. One of them was built, the newer one was built in the 50s, the older one was built in the 30s. It was a WPA project. So Haas Pool, when we replaced, Haas Pool was approaching 80 years old. Town Hall needs a renovation, it turns 100 soon. So we are somewhat at the end with some of our capital projects. We get a lot of useful life out of them, but it's the reality of where we are financially, and we're always going to take care of our facilities and our infrastructure, but sometimes we have to run buildings for a long time. We still have 2 sidewalks in town that were installed as WPA projects in the 30s. They're still in really good shape, so I don't know, they knew how to build sidewalks back then. I can't get 80 years out of a sidewalk now. But when we look at our capital plan, most of it is things that need to be replaced. It's stuff I find interesting, but it's boring. It's water lines, it's sewer lines, it's roads, it's bridges, but we're not adding any of it. It's just really replacing what's there. Next slide. We spoke about this earlier, Community Preservation Act. This is a voter-approved surcharge on your property taxes that gets a small match from the state. It is to be spent specifically in a couple of different areas: historic preservation, housing, open space, and recreation. And somebody always yells at me and says it's open space, comma, or recreation, or open space and recreation, but either way, it's required to be spent in those areas only. Town meeting still has to approve it. It goes through a separate committee process with the selectmen and the FinCom look at it, the Community Preservation Committee looks at it. Anyone can submit projects to CPA. Doesn't have to be the town. Sometimes they come from different town departments. And then they go through a vetting process and the town meeting ultimately appropriates it. CPA, for the most part, really is supposed to be for community preservation. It's supposed to be for the nice things that would otherwise not make their way into the budget. It's for restoring the cannon at Town Hall. It's restoring Memorial Hall, stained glass windows, enhancing parks, and things that are all really good and important for the community, but sometimes don't make it into that tight operating budget and wouldn't technically make it to the top of the list of some of those priorities where, police and fire and public works and schools have real core needs. And to say, well, instead of fixing a truck that's broken that you need, let's, add a pergola somewhere. And it's like, we would really like to do that, but we have to focus on some of those core needs. Now, is there a question?
Yes.
Matt, do you want to go ahead?
Sorry, excuse me.
No worries.
Matthew Heisman, District 3. I'm very curious because I understand how the governor's mansion and stuff all worked out here, but that being like a state historic thing, I wanted to ask, are we going to do like some cool like little plaque in like Veterans Park, or because that's where Abe Lincoln gave that abolitionist address, and it's pretty fierce. I mean, I think we can't not acknowledge that.
Yeah,
I was just wondering about it.
Sure. My recommendation would be shoot an email to the Historic Commission. Those are the kind of things we're supposed to do with CPA money. Every now and then folks say, geez, this doesn't seem like a good use of money. It seems like a nice thing to have. I'll be candid with you. I've followed the CPA law since it was put in 25 years ago. It is for the nice to haves. If we didn't have this carve out, there's no world these things would make it into the operating budget. So it's for preserving the nice to haves.
Yeah, and I just think from a town perspective, it's just such a great little resource for if we wanted people to visit the town and shop in the town. They'd have the whole Abe Lincoln thing, which can bring a lot of people, not masses, but like, we have such a beautiful town. I'd like that to be included because I think it was a waste that we lost it, but it's such a cool event space for the town. So I will follow up with the CPA piece then.
Awesome, thank you.
Tony.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He needs to be on the historic commission.
Yeah, Selectman Cheryl Doyle is recommending you join the Historic Commission. We'll send you an email about that. Next slide, Mike. Free cash, we've all been waiting to, thank you, we've been waiting to get to free cash. So free cash is neither free nor is it cash. And I know that sounds complicated because you're saying, well, what does that mean? Really what free cash is it's surplus revenue. It's similar to your undesignated fund balance if you've ever worked in the nonprofit world, but it's actually not our undesignated fund balance. The answer as to why is a little bit more complicated than we'll get into today. Free cash is money that is left unspent from a year, and it is money that we've taken in that we did not anticipate to take in. So, can we go to the next slide, because I have a explanation I'd like to give. So we talked about surplus revenue budget turnbacks. Go to the next slide. I have two very simple examples I like to give. So we have an employee earning $1,000 per week, and we budget $52,000 for that employee. They step down, and then it takes us 5 weeks to fill that position. Well, that means we didn't spend $52,000. What happened to that $5,000? It's a mystery. It's not. It's a line that came in under expended. It goes to free cash. Not only is it because the law says it goes to free cash, but as I said earlier, the state is very clear about what happens to all the money we take in and all the money we spend. The other example, we budget $100,000 for building permits. And we have a crappy year and we only do $95,000. That would actually come out of what that free cash number is. Similarly, if we had that $100,000 projected in building revenues and we did $110,000, that $10,000 becomes free cash. I'll get to a question in just a second. So it's anything we didn't spend, and it's anything we took in that we didn't anticipate. But we use the term free cash dies on June 30th. And what that means is at the end of the fiscal year, you've closed your books. We close in the middle of July, but the budget year ends June 30th. And you have no free cash. The state has to certify it going into the next year. So we have to submit a significant amount of paperwork to them where they actually see what we had left from the prior year. They make sure that we have any revenues that went over, any expenses that went under, and then if we have a shortfall, which happens occasionally in cities and towns, hasn't happened here, that would also negatively impact your free cash. Now generally what you close the year out at on June 30th, you will have in the following year. It's not available to spend until the state has certified it because they have to make sure that cities and towns haven't run into the red for a year. They're very strict about it. We sometimes get into fights with them because you'll say, oh, well, you know, we've got an encumbrance open and, you know, state grant money's coming in for this, and they'll say, no, you're losing free cash because of it, but don't worry, you'll get it back the next year. It's just a funky process. So it's surplus revenue and it's unexpended funds. I'll take a question and I'll go to talking about free cash in the budget.
This is Matthew, again, District 3. My one thing is, I do a lot of budgets too, and we're now budgeting in Boston, the poverty index now is like 75K, just so you know, for like budgeting average employee revenues. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking of that as it relates to free cash, we updated our free cash policy recently because we had something in there about anything over $5 million would automatically go into the bank. When we wrote that, we had done more than $5 million of free cash in 2 years and 20. A couple things have changed. We have been more conservative in our revenue projections over the last several years, and that was as a result of a policy change about 8 years ago where we said, hey, we got to be a little bit more conservative in these revenue projections. So that helps generate free cash. We've moved some items that we typically paid out of free cash into the operating budget. There's now $1 million worth of vehicles in the operating budget because they're capital items, but they're really rolling stock. We know we have to replace them in a given year. We made, interest rates have gone from, there was a point where like everyone here, we were getting 0.25% on our money to now money that the town has sitting in the bank, cash that's in the bank, we make a couple percentage points over it. We made a very good decision with the middle school money. We borrowed it all at once, worried that interest rates would go up. The process of that money sitting in the bank as we started to build that project generated millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue. And we've had very good building department revenue as well. So all of that has contributed to more free cash than we normally have if you were to look at it a couple of year period, but that's eventually gonna come down over the next few years to a more normal, whatever the new normal is, number. Jeff, go ahead.
It probably makes sense just reiterating the fact that it's not additive year over year. So if we've had 25 million in free cash last year, we have 12 this year. That doesn't mean we've generated 37 million in free cash. It's the 25 is a snapshot in time. The next year, the 12 is going to take some leftover money there and whatever's been generated through that year. So I just don't want people saying, okay, if you look at the last 5 years, we have $40 million, whatever that number is. That's not the case.
Right, that's a great point. So free cash is best used for a couple of things. One is one-time projects, which is really capital projects, or maybe we need to upgrade a curriculum process or something and it's a one-time $200,000 cost. That's its sort of best use. It's great to put into the bank, and we do that sometimes. It's always in the bank, but when we say in the bank, we mean a stabilization fund or somewhere else. It is your primary financial flexibility. Rating agencies are generally okay with you spending free cash. When you take money out of your stabilization account, which is a savings account, they tend to get a little bit more nervous with that. Now, in terms of using free cash to balance the budget, as we've heard, it's never a best practice, right? In a perfect world, the budget balances and you don't need to take some of your surplus revenue and apply it to the budget. But there's a couple of sort of caveats to that. One of them is, I always remind people, there's no such thing as town money or government money. It's all taxpayer money. So with Prop 2.5, taxes are going to go up next year, the normal amount that they go up, and we know there's a public safety override on the ballot. So for the town, whether it's me at the administrative level or the selectmen and the FinCom to say, Cheryl's taxes are going to go up, and we're going to cut your services, but we're sitting on your money in the bank. At some point, that doesn't make sense. There's always a balance about what you want to use it for, but it's not probably appropriate for the town to sit on a lot of taxpayer money, continue to raise taxes, and continue to cut services. Now, you don't want to do it in a way that you damage yourself financially. So if we had just our stabilization fund and we said, well, we're draining everything in the stabilization fund and we're maxing out all of our revenues to get through the budget year, you're really going to hurt yourself the following year. So it's really just not a good idea it's never a great idea to do it, but what's the alternative? Sit on taxpayer money? It's not always the best deal. We're never going to save enough money that we don't have to raise taxes. So you have to balance good fiscal practice with the reality of what's actually facing the community at any given time. Now, we make conservative revenue projections, intentionally make sure we're generating free cash, because that's actually a good financial practice. That's something our rating agencies like to see. That's something the DOR likes to see. Our auditors like to see that we're being conservative. We could reduce the amount of free cash that we're using and increase what those revenue numbers are to a higher number, but then you're just not going to generate the free cash. And having the cash is king, as they say, right, actually gives you the most financial flexibility. So it's also, do you reduce the budgets? Another example would be, we know that most budgets have some sort of return back at the end of the year, but we have to budget in a department for the full number of employees we anticipate to have in that budget. Even though we know in a large budget like police or fire, or maybe DPW or the school department, they're not going to necessarily have 100% of positions filled 100% of the time. But then when you start doing things like, well, budget 95% of your projected salaries, that cuts the budget, but then if you do have a year where that happens, you're in the red, and that's not a good thing. So short as they're saying, it's always a balance. You have money in the bank, you don't want to take money out of the bank to pay your bills, but you don't want to be so obtuse as to sit the money in the bank and cut your services and raise taxes. And remember, that might be a good retirement strategy for all of us on a personal level, because I know everyone likes to compare things to their own personal budget and how a household will handle it. But remember, we're not retiring. So it's not, let me cut my expenses today and then I'll have enough money in the budget to retire. The town's not going to retire. We've been here 150 plus years. We're going to be here in 30 years and 40 years and 50 years. So it's always that balance about, well, we have this extra revenue. What do we do with it? Let's put some away. Let's pay some capital projects. We have some business we have to take care of. And sure, we're taking taxpayer money, and instead of either raising people's taxes or cutting their services, we're using that money. It's important to note too that you use free cash to avoid either cutting services or raising taxes. So if we say don't use the free cash, well, do we cut the services, do we raise the taxes now, or do we wait and delay a tax increase as much as we reasonably can without creating too many problems? So always an interesting point of discussion. The FinCom just updated, made a recommended update to the financial policy. I think the board and the school committee still need to look at it. But what it basically said is acknowledging that we won't use free cash to expand the budget. That's never a really good idea. If we're covering the same services we had the prior year, that's the reality of where we are. And I think the FinCom made the recommendation, it might have been Eric, the chair, that we'll use the same amount this year that we did the prior year to offset the budget. So we don't want to continue to inflate it, but we're covering where expenditure growth has been 8, 9, 10% in areas like health insurance. So a couple other points, and then we can all head on with our Saturday. Reserve fund is just something that the town appropriates, the FinCom controls. This is for any unexpended budgetary amounts in the budget. As we said, budgets are snapshots in time. They are an estimate of what we think we're going to spend. If fuel costs go up too much, we could go to the Finance Commission and say, hey, fuel's up, I need $20,000 to cover fuel, and the FinCom and the board have to approve it and make sure. It's just a reserve like anything else that you know you're not expending. You can't perfectly budget for everything. We could, but then the budget would be 5% higher, or 10% higher, and we know if in a given year the DPW spent $200,000 in fuel, if we think prices are gonna go up a couple percentage, we should budget a couple percent above that, but we're not gonna say let's budget 20 or 30% above it to be always safe. We have a reserve fund for that reason. It's for shortfalls or unintended expenses. We recently did a transfer this year for some legal work related to a planning board lawsuit. It's not for we decide to spend some money in the year and we wanna go to it. So we decide we wanna buy another car in the middle of the year for a department, hey, let's just go to the FinCom and get money. The state wouldn't allow us to do that, we wouldn't do it anyway, but it's not for we just wanna spend money, let's go to the reserve fund. It's, hey, there's a problem here. Now, part of this is because the town doesn't have bottom line budget authority. School departments do by law, as Alan said earlier. So I may have a shortfall of $50,000 in one area, I can't go take that from the police budget. Even if I know I'm gonna have $200,000 left because I'm down a couple officers, I can't say, let me go move that money away. You'd have to call town meeting for it. Hence, that's why reserve funds exist. Henry, you got a question?
Yeah, say an employee wanted more money, and it's not in the budget. Could you take money like that and shift it over as a bonus to them?
No, you couldn't. So we definitely don't do bonuses. So what would likely happen is that would get moved at the end of the year. If there's not enough money in the budget, we would go to town meeting and say, okay, the assessor's office needs $5,000 more. We don't just sort of give raises on speculation. We have a personnel process. You have to actually go through, you either have an individual contract, a union contract, or you have to go through the personnel board to justify where you want to be on your step scale. But even if I think an employee is the best employee in the world and they're step 2, there's really no flexibility in our policies to just say, you're phenomenal, here's an extra $20,000. Sometimes I wish we had that flexibility, but there's very few towns that do. Every position is graded according to the personnel board does an independent grading of we think it's this complicated. And they balance how complicated the position is with the market, but you're at that grade. If you want to advance that grade, you've got to make a justification that your job has changed and it's more complicated. That does happen. Sometimes if we are at the end of the year and we say, gee, we had an admin assistant in this department where the job has really changed, we want to increase their salary. If there's not enough in the line, we have to go to town meeting at the end of the year. Historically, the FinCom hasn't liked going to the reserve fund for that because this is really supposed to be for unanticipated. Something like that, we should be going and changing it at town meeting at the end of the year. That's why we move money around at the special every year at town meeting is these things go back to town meeting because it's really a change in the appropriation. But great question. Next slide. I think we only got 1 or 2 more. We talked briefly about stabilization. This is the town's primary savings account. This is our rainy day fund. It grows year to year. Its interest grows within it. This is not something we would want to touch unless it was sort of a last minute need. And by last minute need, I mean we're balancing the budget, looking at an override down the road or something like that. This is not a, hey, great idea, let's do it. It's truly a rainy day fund. It helps our financial rating. And we would want to be cautious about taking money out of our primary savings account unless there was an important need. So we'll talk about revolving funds briefly. Some of our revenues go into revolving funds, and we talked about this earlier. There has to be a law for it. So some of the money you will pay the rec department for a class goes into the recreation revolving fund to pay for that class. The idea of a revolving fund is it's really something that's user paid that shouldn't hit the taxpayer in general and really should just be paid by that user. So recreation is a great example. The senior center and the library have some revolving funds. They have some programs they charge from where it's, hey, I'm gonna pay $5 for the exercise class. It goes into the revolving fund and then pays out the cost of the exercise class. Most of these are fairly small. Recreation, it's camps and pools, senior center services, it's things like that. Cafeteria receipts at the school, which works a little differently now anyway because of so much federal funding where the person pays for it and then it covers that cost. These are not designed, some of them close at the end of the year. They're not designed to accumulate money. So we don't look at it and say, hey, how much can we get that fund up to be in a good financial position? It's really supposed to pay its costs, pay some related costs, and then that's it. So we would never say, great, the senior center revolving fund is up to $300,000, they're in a safe spot. It should never have a large balance at the end of the year. But this is an example of, for utility funds, where all of our money comes in and has to go to the general fund by law, except the law allows a couple of other areas, but these are not significant expenditures, and you can't spend outside that area. So even if we said, hey, the rec department had a great year, there's $200,000 left, let's go, redo the seats in the GSU lecture hall. It's not a like expense. It's got to be spent on what it was raised for. And DOR also checks these every year, as do our auditors. They're not designed to continue to accumulate large balances year after year. Utility and enterprise funds. We have 3 utility funds, electric, broadband, and water and sewer. Water and sewer is referred to as an enterprise fund. Electric and broadband are technically separate. There's a whole separate statutory framework that governs them. They're managed largely by the Board of Selectmen. Town meeting only approves borrowing for electric and broadband. Water and sewer, just being an enterprise fund, means that everything that goes into that fund comes out of that fund. So you pay a water bill, it pays all the water-related expenses, and that bill pays for its portion of general government costs. Light does that as well. It's just typically enterprise utility fund. These are very common throughout the country. They will generate balances, but they're to be used for that purpose. So in the past with water and sewer, it was all free cash. So if water and sewer had a great year, free cash was good. If water and sewer had a bad year, it was really hurting free cash. That's a really bad finance practice that we corrected about 6 or 7 years ago. And your capital projects for water should be paid out of the water fund, water and sewer. We have a combined fund. The reason is that in theory they're being paid by the user. So if you're using a lot of water and sewer, like a big customer, Home Market Foods for instance, their water sewer bill is a little over $100,000 a month. So as a result of such a large customer, they should be paying a proportionate share of all of the water and sewer expenses. All right, that's the last slide. I do love talking about municipal finance, so if anyone wants to stick around, I'm more than happy to stick around. And as I said, I'll stay for questions. You can always email us or call us or let us know if you have any questions. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Madam Moderator.